Okay, so here we are in the Fiagri system. This is the home of Ghost Legion. Let's have a quick look at the galaxy map. Okay, so here's Fiagri. And what I want you to do, when you get a moment, is hop your way over here to Fiagri. And this is Grybowski's outpost, which is the headquarters of the Ghost Legion, which is where I am now. And you can see this particular system has some nice, juicy Jupiter-like planets, which would be ripe for res action. There, of course, is Charlie in the background trying to chase the cats. The beauty, of course, this is only 84 light seconds away from the star, so a little bit closer than we were in LH3447. Also, a couple of landable moons within the solar system. You can see here. Alright, there's two there, one there, indicated by these three lines coming off them. Sorry, all of these are landable with the blue half circle around them. The ones with these three symbols have stations on them. So let's go in close to this one and click on the planetary map. You can actually scroll around the planet, see these stations, select them, and obviously go in and land on them. We might do that in a minute so I can show you how that's done. So I want you to head to Fiagri, there it is up there, Phiagre, to Grybowski's outpost. It orbits the Earth-like world, the only Earth-like world in the system. And I want to show you something else. People talk about the bubble. This is what they mean. Go into the little, I don't know what this tab's called, there's system information about Fiagri. It tells you the ships that I've got stored there at the moment, a little bit about the system itself. The Sovereign Justice Collective is the minor faction within the system that the Ghost Legion supports. The search tab, right, current location. If you have a selected location, you click on either economical jump routes, which when you're getting here you might want to choose economical rather than fastest because you don't have a lot of fuel and it might be better. The only thing to remember when you're jumping here from LH3447, which...
Communications.
No, not 2447, 3447. Is quite some distance. It's 117 light years. So look, one thing that you might want to think about doing is actually doing a little bit of bounty hunting in the system and getting some money to get a fuel scoop. I'll show you a bit about that in a second. But it is a distance. It's going to take you a while to jump all the way down there to Fiagri. At this point in time, 117 light years. If you're going to do it, you'll have to plan it. Some systems with some stations where you can dock and refuel. That's probably the best way. But once you're there, I think it'd be a good system to base at. Okay, let me get the bookmarks tab. Obviously, you can bookmark things. I've got this one bookmark. That's a bookmark symbol. And if I scroll out, you can see I've got a whole bunch of places bookmarked. But also, we've got the different maps here. Realistic map, which actually shows a realistic looking type of star. Okay, and if you go to systems with more than one star, you can actually see more than one star in the galaxy map, which is pretty cool. So if I can find one, you have to look pretty closely at them. You can see that they've got more than one star visually. I can't see one right now. There should be a whole bunch of them here. You've kind of got to circle around them sometimes to see it, but I can't see any right now, which is a bit annoying because it doesn't allow me to prove the point I'm trying to make. Let's have a look at CD616801. How many stars do you have? Just one. Typical. Anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. If you've got a system that actually has more than one star in it, you can visually see it if you're on the realistic section. So map, view, and then of course we also have the power play view. Now when people talk about the bubble, this is what they're talking about. This big bubble of colour. The different colours represent different powers within the galaxy. And there are a few, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 or so. And when we look at, sorry, selected that, go back. When we look at the bubble on the scale of things, and this is really the point of that, it's really quite insignificant when you look at the entire galaxy, which I always like to do, because it's pretty fucking cool. Okay, scrolling back in. So that's the inhabited, human inhabited space, that bubble. Just out of interest, this guy here, Lee Yong Rui, anywhere in his space, ships and modules are discounted by 15%. So you always want to buy stuff from one of his control stations. Just a good thing to remember. Okay, so we're here in Fiagri. That's not really the point of this video. The point of this video is to explain a little bit about modules, ships, and how to put them together. So here we are in Ryboski's outpost. That's where I want you to go. So our next gaming session, you can be here. Take you a bit to get there, but you'll be able to do it. We won't go into this stuff. Missions, commodities, passenger, contacts. I've talked a bit about that. Let's go into outfitting. So here's my beautiful Federal Corvette. Now there's 4 sections here I'm going to focus on. Hardpoints, utility mounts, core internals, optional internals. Livery, it's just paint jobs and decals and stuff. It's inconsequential. Stored modules we'll talk about later. Hardpoints is just another term for weapons in this game. There are 4 sizes of hardpoints. Small, medium, large, and huge. Obviously not all ships have all of them, but the Corvette is a combat ship, so it has them all. It has 2 huge hardpoints. You can see here I've got 2 big multi-cannons. These ones are at the top back of the ship. They're in a fantastic location. It has 1 large hardpoint on the belly of the ship, which it's not the best placement because your target kind of has to be parallel to you or underneath you to really get a good advantage of it. It has 2 medium hardpoints on either side, halfway-ish ship, and 2 beam lasers, probably about 3/4 or a bit more, maybe a bit more towards the nose on the top. I've gone for multi-cannons for the back, for the biggest ones, because I've loaded the rest of them with beam lasers, and beam lasers are great at shredding shields, and the multi-cannons are really good at tearing through hulls. Great thing about multi-cannons is they don't draw too much of your distributor. If we look here at my dashboard, you can see down the bottom right, just next to the picture of my ship with the shields, the system, engine and weapons. So when you're firing, your weapon tank, I'm not sure what that's called, but your weapon silo there depletes. Some things deplete it faster than others. The multi-cannons don't really deplete it as much as the beam lasers deplete it a lot. So I haven't got any pips in weapons yet, because obviously I'm flying through a system, just put in system and engine. But the beam lasers really go through that. So that's the one poor thing, but they also go through shields really fast. The other thing they do is they produce a lot of heat. They do thermal damage. They draw quite a bit of power, and I'll talk about that down here under your total power management in a sec. But they produce quite a lot of heat. The multi-cannons, on the other hand, have a lower thermal load. 2.2, they're a huge slot, remember, so 2.2, but compared to the large beam has 7.6 per second, so it produces a lot more heat. So, just really briefly, that's the weapons. Look, you can put, almost anything in the hard slot, right? But like I said, I like the multi-cannons. A lot of people like the plasma accelerator. There's one more thing to remember about weapons, and I'll show you with the large, the large hardpoint. If we look at the beam lasers available here, it's not a good example. Medium. Nope. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, good. So in this slot at the moment, I've got a beam laser. Now that little symbol there is the gimbaled symbol. Sorry, that little symbol down the bottom is the gimbaled symbol. Looks like a little almost nuclear symbol. It tracks, so it tracks automatically. This is a turreted symbol, and turrets track too, but you don't fire turrets. You can set turrets to different fire specifications, but you don't fire them. They sort of fire automatically. It's good sometimes to have turrets on your ship. They can be dangerous too, because you set them to fire always or fire only on your target, etc., etc. And they're great if things are behind you, because they can target and fire because they're on a little turret. They don't do a lot of damage. You can see here the damage per second is a lot lower than my currently installed gimbaled beam. But if I have a look at this one, no, actually, hang on. The other symbol I wanted to show you, which wasn't there, is this symbol here. So this is a fixed weapon. So there are three types of weapons: gimbaled, fixed, and the turret that I showed you. There's no turrets in this one. Fixed do more damage per second, but they don't target automatically like gimbaled weapons. So gimbaled weapons are definitely the ones you use starting off. Fixed weapons take, obviously, time and practice. So I wanted to show you that. Alright? Targeted, gimbaled, and turreted. Stick with gimbaled for now for pretty much everything. I've messed around with turrets, but they've changed turrets a little bit. They're not really as effective and sort of difficult to manage. I won't go much into the other weapons at the moment. You can experiment with them later. And there's utility mounts. Utility mounts are placed at various points on your ship, and sometimes you need to think about where you're putting your utility mounts. And I'll explain that in a sec. I've got 4 shield boosters. Shield boosters boost your shields, obvious, by a percentage. The other thing to remember is that most modules have a class and a rating. Utility mounts all have the same class, basically class 1, but they have ratings A, B, C, D, and E. These shield boosters are A. A is generally the best, and I'll explain that more when we go into the optionals and the cores. And they boost the shields by 20%, you can see there. So I've got 4 of those, and they boost the shield strength down here to 1300, which is quite high. I've also got point defense. Point defense is basically a surface-to-air missile type tracking destroyer thingy. It shoots kinetic ammunition at missiles that have been targeted against me. It's pretty cool. And I've got 2 heatsink launchers. they are pretty much what they say they are. They can reduce heat build-up in the ship. I'll explain that more in more detail. Important to note they've got only 2 uses per heatsink launcher, which is why I've got 2, because that gives me 4. And a kill warrant scanner. Kill warrant scanner, amongst other types of scanners, there are different types of scanners: wake scanner, kill warrant scanner, manifest scanners. The kill warrant scanner doesn't tell you whether someone's wanted or not, it just tells you whether they're wanted in more systems than the one you're in. And effectively what the kill warrant scanner does is it just increases the amount of money you can make on a single kill, which means that overall, a number of kills you can get more credits, which is a useful thing to do. I won't go into the rest of these. Obviously there's the shield boosters I have, the heatsink launchers. Wake scanners are situational. You don't use them in combat, but there are engineers, I'll explain those another time, and they want wake scan data. Anyway, so they're the utility mounts. The Corvette has a lot. 8 to be precise. Then we're going to have a look at the optionals before we go into the internals. As I said, everything has a class and a rating. Classes go from 1 right up to 8. This has an 8 in the cores, but no 8s in the optionals. I think the only thing with an 8 in the optionals is the clipper. So I've got a 7A, so a class 7 A-rated shield generator, so the best I could get to combat ship. So the other thing to remember about modules is they also have a weight. And good, there's every type here. The A rating is obviously the best, but it's not always the best. It's situationally not always the best. Obviously in a combat ship, an A-rated shield is going to be better. So there's the A to E, E being effectively the worst. And you can see if I put my cursor over the E, it lowers my shield strength from over 1300 to 930. But the other difference is the mass. The E weighs 80 tons. The A weighs 80 tons too. But obviously the amount of shield protection strength it provides is 400 more. The B is not quite as good, only about 100 less, but it's a lot heavier, and that's always the case with the B rated anything. It's always the heaviest, and it has the highest integrity, which means it can take the most damage. And that can be important if you're trying to get a module that's hardy, that's fortified in a way, right? This one also produces less power, and you'll find as they get lower in class, they draw less power. Okay. There's bi-weave shield generators here. The big difference is obviously this, if we look at the same class, so the 7 normal shield and the 7 bi-weave. The 7 normal shield will give you 1128. The bi-weave will give you 1028. So it's only 100 less. But the really good thing about the bi-weave is that it recharges a lot faster. So you sacrifice a little bit of shield strength for a much recharge rate, which can be important sometimes. I'm thinking about going to if I get a 7A bi-weave, I'm not sure if I can get one. I might do it, sacrifice a little bit of shield strength for faster recharge. Anyway, that's a little bit about the class 7 and the rating A, B, C, D, E. So that's I've got 7A shields. I've also got 2 shield cell banks. Shield cell banks, essentially you can discharge them and they recharge your shields. Each of these 7A has 4 charges, that's 8 total. When you set off a shield cell, the heat in the ship scopes, so it's important really to set off a heatsink straight after you set off a shield cell. Little trick, pro tip, you can charge a shield cell, start recharging your shields, immediately your heat percentage will start to skyrocket. straight away pretty much set off a heatsink. A second or so after that, you can set off another shield cell, because one might not always recharge your shields completely. If you do it properly, you might want to get them almost depleted. Set off your shield cell, set off a heatsink. A second or so later, set off another shield cell. And even though they produce heat, because the heatsink is working, you can have almost back-to-back shield cells for the cost of one heatsink, which is why I have half the amount of heatsinks that I do shield cells. 8 shield cells, 4 heatsinks. Then I've got a lot of hull reinforcements here. This basically increases the integrity of the ship. This is the hull, the amount of damage the hull can actually take, which is important obviously in a combat ship. If I ever lose shields, I can still tank a little bit of damage. Something that was introduced into the game a little while ago is what they call SLF, self-launched fighters. And I've got a fighter hangar bay. Only certain ships, the big ones, can hold fighters, and they're pretty cool. I'll show you that another time. You can man them yourself, which is pretty awesome. You've got to have basically a pilot, so you can either man the ship yourself, or you can stay in the main ship, and your pilot pilots the your hired mercenary pilot pilots the little fighter. They're light, easily destroyed, but they do quite a bit of damage. I never pilot these. I like to stay in the Corvette and almost use these as like a bit of a distraction, although they can be very helpful. Fuel scoop we talked about before, so I've put a class 4A fuel scoop in here. It scoops fuel at about 0.34 tons a second. It's not particularly fast, but I didn't want to put it in the higher slot because I wanted to put in hull reinforcements and stuff like that. And then the rest of it is taken up by more hull reinforcements. So I've really packed this ship for being a fighter. And then planetary approach suite is really mandatory if you want to land on a planet. It sort of comes with the ship. I think pretty much it comes with horizons for every ship. Finally, core internals, and this is more important. So you see here, it has one class 8 slot, and that's the power plant. Basically the power plant powers the modules. So you can see down here, this 8A power plant gives me 39.91 megawatts. I have actually modified this power plant. I've overcharged it, and we'll go into modifications, but it's basically given me a higher power capacity. This 8A starts off at 36 available megawatts, and I've increased it to 39.91. At the cost of a little bit of integrity. So it's instead of having 165 integrity, it's 149, which means that if someone targets my power plant, it goes down faster, which is not ideal, but it also allows me to carry all those beam weapons. Just in the scheme of things, if we went down to an 8E plant, you could see here that I would not be able to use basically anything. I'd have a maximum available 24 megawatts, and I need 38.9, so that would not be ideal. And realistically, I'm just getting away with all my power usage here. I've got 39.91 available, I'm using 38.93, I've got like a 1 megawatt left. So that's your power plant. It's important. It powers all the modules. But you don't always need A's. For example, the other thing to remember, let's just have a quick look at this, is that the D is actually the lightest of all of them. If we look at the mass, the 8A is, in this case, 80 tons. It's slightly less than it would be because it's modified. But D is 64. And the other thing to remember about weight when it comes to modules is that the lighter things are, the more you can increase things like jump range and speed. Okay, that's important to remember. If you're building a ship just for trading or even exploring, you actually don't always want the A-rated modules. You might want the D-rated ones because they're the lightest of all the rated modules regardless of class size. And obviously the lower the class, if we can find a 3D for example, that's actually very light, but of course I wouldn't be able to power anything at all. I've got 9 megawatts in this ship, it just wouldn't work. Okay. Then we've got thrusters. I'll get to this in a minute. We've got thrusters. They obviously power your propulsion. Different things. Thrusters aren't just normal. They're not just about moving forward at velocity. They're also about up and down movement. Can help how fast you turn and all that sort of stuff as well. Frameshift drive is important. It clearly allows supercruise and hyperspace jumps. The higher your rating frameshift drive, the further you're going to be able to jump. For instance, if I put a 6E on this thing, I save some power, but my jump range is dismal. Not even 6. Whereas with the A, which is, again, I've modified slightly. Slightly, by slightly I say I've got level 4 increased frameshift drive range, which has taken it from where are we? 8 tons. I can't remember what it was unmodified. It was pretty poor anyway. 12 or something, up to about 15. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can do better than that, but we might go back there and have a look. So frameshift drive. Getting an A-rated frameshift drive is pretty important for almost any ship. Life support. I've actually got a 5A, even though it's not entirely necessary. The A gives me 25 minutes emergency support, so if your canopy gets breached, or there are a few good reasons to have a good life port in a combat ship. Essentially I can have a hole in my canopy and still have a long time to go, whereas a 5E I'd only have 5 minutes, which may not always be enough to get back to the station before you die. And then the distributor. The distributor essentially distributes power between engine system and weapons capacitors, the things I showed you before, and the rate at which they do so. So it shows here the weapons capacity and the recharge, and the engines and the recharge, and the systems and the recharge time. Okay. So distributor, again, depends. Combat ship, quite important. You want things to be recharging quickly. Trading ship or an exploration ship, not so much. Sensors, I think they're changing this in a new update, but essentially most people go for D. If you look at the originally installed E's, they're 160 tons, and that has effect again on speed, jump range. So I've put D's in because they're less than half weight, and increased jump range and speed. They have an effect on emissions range, how hot you are and how far other people can see you and whatever. But I don't really pay much to that. Often I'll just put D's on the sensors. And the fuel tank, you almost keep the fuel tank at the best you can get in that. Last one here is the essentially your armor, and I've gone up to military grade composite here. It's given me a lot of armor. Put the lightweight alloys back in there, it loses 600-700 armor value. And there are other types of armor you can get, they're not showed there. Okay, so that's the core internals and the optionals. That's pretty much a ship and how we outfit one. As I said, you want to make sure you always buy anything in Li Yong Rui space. It's